Introduction. The difference between bright and burned. There is a version of burning that destroys the thing doing the burning. You have probably seen it, and may have experienced it yourself. The period when everything was firing, energy high, purpose clear, output extraordinary. When you were operating at a level that felt like the fullest version of yourself, giving everything you had to something that genuinely mattered. The fire was real, and then, at some point, the fuel ran out. The energy that had felt limitless proved to have limits. The clarity that had felt permanent proved to be conditional. The extraordinary period was followed by something ordinary, or something worse than ordinary. Something depleted. This is burning out, and it is the shadow version of what this book is about. This book is about burning bright. Not the exhaustion sprint that ends in depletion, but the sustainable high-performance state that continues because it is built on foundations that renew rather than deplete. The difference between these two versions of burning is not the intensity of the work, both involve genuine intensity. It is the relationship between the burning and the fuel, whether the burning is consuming the available fuel faster than it can be replenished, or whether the burning is connected to sources of renewal that make the intensity sustainable over time. Most people who have burned out did not choose to. They chose to care deeply and work hard. They chose to bring everything they had to something that mattered to them. These are not wrong choices. The problem was not the intensity of the investment. The problem was a missing infrastructure, a set of practices, boundaries, relationships, and orientations that could have sustained the intensity rather than allowing it to exhaust itself. This book is about building that infrastructure. Not to dampen the fire. A dimmer burn is not the goal. But to give it the conditions under which it can continue, at full brightness, for the long duration that the work you care about actually requires. Chapter 1. What makes you burn? The first thing to understand about burning bright is that not everything burns with equal intensity. There are activities, projects, relationships, and forms of contribution that ignite something in you, that call on the fullest version of your capability and leave you more energized than when you began, even when the work has been genuinely demanding. And there are activities, projects, and relationships that drain you, that require the same or more output but produce depletion rather than renewal. This distinction matters enormously for the sustainability of high performance. The person who is working primarily in their zone of genuine engagement can sustain intensity that would be impossible to maintain in work that does not engage them at a deep level. The fuel, in this case, is partly being generated by the work itself. The doing is partly the replenishment. This is not magic. It is physiology and psychology operating together. Work that engages what you genuinely care about and what you are genuinely good at activates systems of intrinsic motivation that produce a fundamentally different energetic relationship to the effort than work that is done primarily for external reasons. The practical question is, what actually makes you burn? Not what should make you burn according to the expectations of your profession or your background or the admiration of people around you. What actually does? Where do you notice the specific quality of engagement that makes time strange, when it passes faster than expected because you were genuinely in the thing? These are your burning zones. Not every moment of work can or should be in them. Every meaningful pursuit has portions that are not intrinsically engaging, and the capacity to do that work anyway is its own form of strength. But the overall architecture of your working life should contain enough of the burning zones to make the total sustainable. If the burning zones are absent, or present but chronically subordinated to the draining ones, the sustainability problem is structural, and it requires a structural response. Chapter 2. The Architecture of Sustainable Energy. High performance that lasts is not primarily a willpower story. It is an architecture story. The people who sustain exceptional output over long periods do not do so primarily through the force of determination, though determination is part of it. They do so primarily through the design of their days, their weeks, their environments, and their habits, through choices about how their energy is structured, replenished, and protected. This architecture operates at several levels. The daily level, the specific sequencing of high-demand work, recovery activities, and lower-demand tasks. The weekly level, the pattern of intensity and restoration across the days of the week. The longer cycle level, the use of extended recovery periods, real breaks, genuine transitions, that prevent the accumulation of fatigue that no daily routine can fully address. Each of these levels matters. And the most common architectural failure is the collapse of the recovery portions, the progressive narrowing of the space between intense work periods, as urgency fills every available interval. The person who is always on, who takes their work to bed and picks it up before breakfast, who has not had a genuine break in months, is living without the recovery architecture their performance depends on. And the performance, despite the input, eventually declines. There is also the question of what counts as recovery. Not all rest is equal. Passive consumption, scrolling, watching, absorbing without engaging, can feel restful while actually maintaining the brain in a moderately activated state that prevents the deeper restoration that genuine downtime provides. Recovery that genuinely restores the capacity for high performance tends to involve either physical activity, genuine social connection, experiences in nature, or forms of play and creative engagement that are entirely disconnected from the work. The specific form is individual. The commonality is genuine disengagement from the work mode. Build the architecture intentionally. It will not build itself. The urgency of the work will always press against the space for recovery. Protecting that space is an act of strategic intelligence, not laziness. Chapter 3. Protecting the flame. High performance requires protection, not the protection of isolation or excessive caution. The flame needs oxygen, and oxygen means engagement, exposure, and the friction of real challenge. But the protection of intentional boundaries around the things that most directly sustain your capacity to operate at your best. The most important thing to protect is your energy before your peak performance window. For most people, the cognitive resources available for demanding, creative, and complex work are highest in the morning and progressively less available as the day continues. The person who spends their best hours in reactive mode, responding to others' needs, attending to administrative demands, consuming rather than producing, has spent their most valuable resource on tasks that could have waited. The most important work gets whatever is left. This is an architecture failure. And it is extremely common because the reactive demands present themselves with apparent urgency while the important work does not arrive with an announcement. The important work requires you to make it the first claim on your attention, by design, against the default pull toward the inbox and the queue. The second most important thing to protect is your relationship to why you are doing the work. The meaning connection, the clear, felt sense of why this work matters, who it serves, what it is for, is the deepest source of renewable fuel. When the meaning connection is strong, work that is objectively demanding feels sustainable. When the meaning connection is weakened, by the accumulation of tasks disconnected from the larger purpose, by the erosion of context in a long project, by the simple forgetting that happens during sustained effort, the same work becomes exhausting at a fraction of the intensity. Maintaining the meaning connection is an active practice. It requires periodically pulling up from the details to re-establish the line of sight from the work in front of you to the reason it matters. Not as a motivational exercise, but as a genuine recalibration. The work is the same. The fuel for doing it is entirely different when the connection to its purpose is clear. Chapter 4. The Myth of the Hustle. Before going further, it is worth naming one of the most damaging myths in contemporary achievement culture: the glorification of overwork. The hustle narrative is seductive. It tells a clean story. The extraordinary achievers worked harder than the ordinary ones. They slept less, sacrificed more, pushed further. Their output was extraordinary because their input was extraordinary. And therefore, if you want extraordinary results, you need to match their input. This narrative is wrong in several important ways, and the ways it is wrong are consequential. First, the selection bias. The visible examples of the hustle narrative are survivors. The people who pushed to extremes and came out with extraordinary results. The people who pushed to extremes and burned out, broke down, or simply produced mediocre work at the cost of everything else. These are not the examples held up. They are the much larger population that the narrative ignores. Second, the intensity fallacy. The relationship between hours of input and quality of output is not linear. Cognitive performance degrades with sleep deprivation and sustained overwork in ways that are well documented and significant. The person working 80 focused hours a week is not producing twice the quality output of the person working 40. They are often producing worse output per hour, from a more exhausted system, at the cost of the recovery that would allow them to sustain the performance over a longer arc. Third, the sustainability problem. Even when the hustle produces extraordinary short-term results, it often does so by borrowing from the future. The exhaustion, the relationship damage, the health costs, the atrophied recovery, these debts come due. The question is not whether overwork can produce results. The question is what the full cost accounting looks like, and whether those results could have been produced, more sustainably, by a better architecture. Burning bright is not burning everything. Know the difference. Chapter 5. When the flame flickers. Even with a good architecture and intentional protection, there will be periods when the flame flickers. The motivation wanes. The meaning feels distant. The energy that was once reliable becomes effortful to generate. The work that felt aligned begins to feel burdensome. This is not necessarily a signal that something is wrong. It is a signal that something needs attention. The first question when the flame flickers is this a depletion signal or a direction signal? A depletion signal means the flame is flickering because you have been burning without adequate recovery. The infrastructure has failed or been neglected. The restoration that should have been happening has not been happening at the rate required to sustain the output. The fix is renewal, genuine rest, recovery at a sufficient depth to clear the accumulated fatigue, a reconnection to the activities and relationships that restore you. A direction signal means the flame is flickering because the direction is wrong. The work has moved away from what genuinely engages you. The goals were set from someone else's script. The path was right at one point but has not been updated to reflect who you have become. The fix is not rest but recalibration. An honest look at whether the direction still serves what you actually care about, and a willingness to make changes if it does not. The difference between these two matters. Treating a direction signal with rest will produce a well-rested person still heading the wrong way. Treating a depletion signal with recalibration will produce confusion, rearranging the deck chairs while the ship is sinking from exhaustion. The indicators. Depletion usually feels like everything is effortful, not just the work. Rest helps even if it is brief. Direction misalignment feels specifically targeted at the work. Rest does not help much. You wake up restored and still feel the pull away from the work in question. When you can tell the difference, you can respond appropriately. And appropriate response is everything. Chapter 6. Burning bright with other people. Almost everything that matters is built with others. And burning bright in the company of others is a different skill than burning bright alone. The people you work with are either a source of fuel or a source of drain. This is not primarily about whether they are pleasant to be around, though that matters, but about the deeper question of whether the relationship produces energy or consumes it. Whether the collaboration multiplies the capability of each person involved, or taxes it. Whether the environment created by the group brings out more or less of what each person has to give. The characteristics of environments where people burn bright together are consistent. A sense of genuine purpose shared across the group, enough safety that people can be honest without significant social risk, high standards that are held with care rather than judgment, and the consistent experience of being around people who bring their best and expect the same. These environments do not self-assemble. They are built by leaders who prioritize them, by individuals who choose to model the behaviors that make them possible, and by the accumulated choices of everyone in the group about how to treat each other on ordinary days. Your contribution to the collective burning bright is not primarily through your output, though your output matters. It is through the effect your presence has on others' ability to operate at their best. The person who is genuinely present and attentive makes others feel worth attending to. The person who is honest and generous with their thinking raises the quality of everyone's thinking. The person who maintains high standards without making others feel inadequate creates conditions where high standards feel achievable rather than threatening. This is influence in the deepest sense. Not the management of impressions, but the actual effect on others' capacity. And it is available to every person in a group, regardless of their formal position. Chapter 7. The Long Burn. The short version of burning bright is the sprint. The 6-month project where everything was at maximum intensity and the results were extraordinary. The year of exceptional output that produced a step change in what you had built. The sprint is real. Sometimes the sprint is necessary. But the sprint is not the goal. The goal is the long burn. The decades-long relationship with work you care about, at a level of intensity that produces genuine contribution, without the accumulated cost that makes the later decades of that arc require recovery from the earlier ones. The long burn requires everything this book has covered. The connection to what actually makes you burn, the architecture of sustainable energy, the intentional protection of the things that sustain your capacity, the honest evaluation of hustle culture, the ability to read and respond to the flickering flame, and the cultivation of the relationships that make the burning brighter. But it also requires something not yet named, the willingness to play a long game with yourself. The long game with yourself means investing in your future capacity as seriously as you invest in your current output. It means treating your health, your relationships, your continued development, and your sense of meaning as assets that require maintenance and investment, not as personal matters that will take care of themselves once the important work is done. The important work is never done, which means the investment in your capacity to do it must be ongoing. The rest, the renewal, the relationships, the physical investment, the periodic recalibration toward what genuinely matters, these are not interruptions to the work. They are the foundation from which the work continues. The long burn is not the diminished burn. It is the sustained bright burn, the one that continues to illuminate, to contribute, to matter, across all of the years you have to give it. Chapter 8. What you leave behind. At some point in the long burn, the question of legacy begins to feel less abstract. Not as a monument-building exercise or an ego project. The best legacies are rarely built by people primarily thinking about their legacies. But as a natural consequence of burning for long enough at something meaningful, the light falls somewhere. Other people see it, and some of those people begin to burn a little brighter themselves. This is the deepest version of what burning bright can mean. Not the private achievement, the personal excellence, the optimized high performance for its own sake. But the transmission. The way you're burning gives permission to others to burn. The way your commitment raises others' ambitions. The way the quality of your work creates a new baseline for what is possible in the people who witness it. You may not think of yourself as someone with the kind of influence that produces this transmission. That is probably an underestimate. The transmission does not require fame or formal authority. It requires presence, genuine, invested, high-quality presence in the environments you inhabit. The colleague who always brings their best to the work, even when the work is unglamorous. The parent who is genuinely present with their children rather than physically present and mentally elsewhere. The person who treats every interaction as worth caring about. These transmissions happen every day, in ordinary circumstances, without notice. They accumulate into something that outlasts the specific moments and the specific people who created them. The quality of engagement you brought to the people around you becomes part of how they approach their own work and their own relationships. The fire you carried becomes part of what they carry. That is the legacy of burning bright, not the monument, the light itself, continuing through the people it touched. Conclusion. Keep the flame. This book began with a distinction: burning bright and burning out. Burning out is the consumption of the flame by the burning itself. Burning bright is the flame sustained by the right conditions, the fuel source aligned with genuine engagement, the architecture designed for recovery as well as output, the meaning connection maintained, the relationships that renew, the long game being played with clarity and intention. You do not have to choose between intensity and longevity. That is the false choice that the hustle narrative presents, and it is wrong. The intensity is available for the long duration, but it requires the infrastructure, the intentionality, and the willingness to tend the flame rather than simply letting it run. Tend it. The burning matters. What you build with it matters. The light it casts, on your own work, on the people around you, on the things that would not exist without the particular quality of your engagement, that matters too. Keep the flame. Key takeaways. Not all work burns with equal intensity. Identifying your zones of genuine engagement, where doing the work partly replenishes the energy for doing it, is the starting point for sustainable high performance. High performance that lasts is an architecture story more than a willpower story. The daily, weekly, and longer cycle structure of your energy and recovery matters more than the force of determination. Protect the beginning of your day and your connection to the meaning of your work. These are the most valuable resources in the system and the first to be consumed by reactive demands. The hustle narrative is selection bias. The visible examples are survivors. The full population of people who pushed to extremes includes many more who broke down or produced diminishing returns. Overwork borrows from the future. When the flame flickers, Determine whether it is a depletion signal, needs rest, or a direction signal, needs recalibration. The responses are different, and the distinction matters. You burn brighter with the right people. Invest in environments where purpose, safety, and high standards coexist. Your effect on others' ability to operate at their best is as important as your output. The long burn is the goal. Play the long game with yourself. Invest in your future capacity, health, relationships, renewal, meaning, as seriously as you invest in current output. Your burning leaves light behind. The transmission to others, the permission, the raised ambitions, the new baseline for what is possible, is the deepest form of what burning bright can mean. A note at the end. Somewhere in your life, there is a fire waiting. Maybe it is already going, and this book was an invitation to tend it more deliberately. Maybe it has been banked for a while, protected but not fully lit, waiting for a moment that never quite arrived. Maybe it burned hard at some point and went out, and the thought of trying again carries the weight of the previous ending. Whatever its current state, the fire is there, and it is worth tending. Not because extraordinary output is the highest goal, but because the quality of a fully engaged life, lived in genuine connection with what you care about, bringing your best to the people and work that matter, is one of the most valuable things a person can experience and offer. The conditions are buildable, the infrastructure is learnable, the long burn is possible. Light it, tend it, keep it going.